Okay, King Tut, the boy king. Everybody knows him as that. He's the one that never seemed to have gotten his chance in life, that he didn't get to live to be an elder king. He died far too young. And it becomes special to us all because um, because of that fact that he's, taken out a little too young. And he's the only real Egyptian mummy we have that's a pharaoh with all of his accoutrements and all of his array of gold things and all the stuff that Carter had found when he found him. And, I think we deify him even more a little bit because just like rock stars that die whenever they're young, this seems to be one of those, die young, stay pretty type of things. And they've wanted to do a lot of work on him for years. In fact, they ran DNA tests on him years ago, and Hawass supposedly kept the DNA results a secret for years and years, about 15, 18 years or so. And finally, he got ousted here not long ago, and whenever he did, they went through the DNA results. It caused quite a stink in some neighborhoods because it showed that he is Northern European, or his closest match would be a Northern European person. And of course, most everybody thought that he would have to have been Persian or something, or some mix. And there's a lot of people that, of course, thought that he would have been African, and that African pharaohs were from way back when. And initially, whenever they found the mummies, they were always so dark, skinned from, what we find out now is the shellac that they used to put on them in the tanning process. They've taken a flick of that shellac and held it up in the light, and it's almost like a sunglasses effect. So it just darkens things, and then over and above that, just the time itself that it would take. But some incredible artwork with him, and it came through here, and we got to have a chance to go take a look at it, and it's quite incredible. And all they brought was like 35 pieces. But whenever they went to do these tests onto him, they took a bunch of doctors into his tomb and actually ran actual tests on him here. And whenever they did, they noticed that there was two things, and there used to be this big controversy that thought that he had been killed by a blow to the back of the head because there was an extra odd lump. It's right here in the back of his head. And they've also looked at his legs, and now they were able to run another scan on it, and it shows how his legs had separated, but also how his knee and cartilage here is deformed from what it should be. This is kind of the way it should be, but that's almost a little scalloped, and you can tell this is offset. So he wasn't walking well, and his tibia seems to be twisted somewhat a little bit compared to the location it should be. And then, of course, what they really notice is there's a clear break that's here in his femur, and there's torn skin that's in between here. And so they thought that it's possible that it could be even a sword wound or a gash, or that he had gotten hurt real bad. Well, now they're realizing that he probably got ran over from his chariot or something that was very much like that, because it seems to have crushed right up through him and broken his leg at the same time. Now, he had a kind of a gimp leg, too. And his gimp leg, here's something funny. They say, you don't think he's white? Well, look at that. They always put the stones on there and stuff. That's kind of funny. Yeah, so anyhow, so they run all these DNA tests and methods and stuff, and this nanopore DNA sequencing and all these type of things, and they come to find out that it does reach Northern Europeans best. In fact, there's a bunch of these DNA charts that are here, but in doing so, a while back, they ended up coming up with this portrait of him. I don't know if you can see that real good. They came up with this portrait of him, and of course that raised a big stink because they were like, everybody thought he was all black, and some of the Persian people didn't think that was Persian enough. But this was a reconstruction given to somebody that does that professional reconstructive surgery thing. So that just got kind of, a big controversy about it. In fact, half of it was, hey, that's cool, and half of it was, man, there's a big controversy about it. And so now they've done the DNA sequencing, and what they've gone to do is redoing it here. And of course, he's a little buck too. So they've said, no, he has blue eyes. That his genome was set up to where he has not the bright blue eyes, but blue eyes. And so that's odd. Um, and Steve Martin's old song here used to say, born in Babylonia, moved to Macedonia, King Tut. And I think that's true. I think that's actually true. He was born in Babylon and then raised up there. And so there's a lot of DNA sample, things that are out here. But in 2008, a team began research on Tutankhamun and the mummified remains of the members of his family. The results from DNA samples finally put to rest questions about Tutankhamun's lineage, proving that his father was Akhenaten, but that his mother was not of Akhenaten's known wives. His mother was one of his father's 5 sisters, although it's not known which one. And so she would have been a half-breed, but also that's inbreeding. The team was able to establish the probability, and you've probably heard this before, but with a 99% chance that Amenhotep III was the father of the individual in KV-55, which is in turn the father of Tutankhamun. Interesting fact here, Tutankhamun actually used to be, had a different name. That he was Tutankhaten, and then Tutankhaten changed, and I don't know if you've heard about it, but he changed from worshiping Aten to back to Amen, right? So it's Tutankhamun is what we call him, but his actual ideogram says Amen Tutank, right? So they put the Amun, or the deity, first in it. Anyhow, the young king's mother was found through the DNA testing of a mummy designated as the younger lady, which was found lying beside Queen Tai in the alcove. Her DNA proved that, like his father, she was the child of Amenhotep III and Tai. Thus, Tutankhamun's parents were both brother and sister. Queen Tai had much political influence in court and acted as an advisor to his son after the death of her husband. Some geneticists dispute these findings, however, and complain to the team might have used inappropriate analysis techniques. Well, it's possible, but now they've run them through again, and they seem to have the same type of techniques that are coming out of it. So he was an Egyptian pharaoh. He was in the 18th dynasty. He ruled from about 1300, 1332, 13 to 23. So he didn't get to rule that long at all. In the conventional chronology, in the conventional chronology, during the period of Egyptian history known as the New Kingdom, he is popularly referred to as King Tut. His original name, Tutankhamun, means living image of Aten, while Tutankhamun means living image of Amun. Hieroglyphs in the name Tutankhamun was typically written Amun Tut Ankh because of the scribal custom that placed the divine name in front of the beginning of the word. So, there's his reconstruction right here of the face, but now they've changed it somewhat. And so that gets people all up in arms. And also, somebody in his family must have had a green eyes, because they have this eerie green-eyed effect right here. That's in one of the statues. It's a little detail figure here. So they're saying that that's another effect that he's Eastern European. That they have those family ones they bury with them too, and one of them had bright green eyes, and they made sure that they were bright green eyes. So, where's some more info here? Doom doo 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 doom doo. So here's what the haplogroup set looks like for the HGR1B Y-DNA haplogroup set. And so they come out of here, and they say that some of that has bred off into Africa through the Nubian thing in a later time, and they have small percentages through here, but as it gets darker and darker, that becomes the 60 to 100% range, and they get pegging in the 100% range all over here in Northern Europe. Isn't that strange? And then they get one little group here that's got a peg right out of the group. Yeah. So there's another look at this too that shows you that it's kind of the I DNA of the Y DNA shows that it really is more trapped all through this area. All right? Haplogroup Y. And I'm not sure what that even says. I think it's in, oh, that was the Genghis Khan Empire. I'm sorry. That was showing a spread out of something that happened after the Genghis Khan Empire and showing how the people from Genghis Khan had inbred into the population. But let's look up here. There is always a lot of, controversy behind this, but hopefully this will lay some of it to rest, and people will just have to come to grips with it and stuff, because you look at all these ancient pharaohs here, and they all have blonde hair, and I've made one called Blue-Eyed Blonde Egyptians, and Blue-Eyed Gods, and Blue-Eyed Mummies, because there's a lot of them that represent themselves as being blue-eyed. And I thought that was strange, even though they all have different colors. And you find out that's just colors of clay that they're going with, and they're different shades. I mean, I get darker than this guy here whenever I get out in the tan, and generally keep something like this. She's got one blue eye, the other one's missing. The blue eyes on this guy are incredible. So anyhow, Tut, in his haplogroup set, where is it at? Well, here's one of the things that came with it off the show. And it tells you that despite the refusal of the Secretary General of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, Zahi Hawass, to release any DNA results which might indicate the racial ancestry of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, they said they leaked results. Well, what happened was they kicked him out, and then they leaked the results. And it says that 99% 6% match of Western European Y chromosomes. So there's that, and then there's an effect where they've done a cross-setting of these same people. Really? You're going to do that? You want to turn off private browsing here, people? Then they've done a cross-section onto them and gotten a different effect. And so here's an article here. And mummy DNA shows the ancient Egyptians don't have much in common with modern Egyptians. So they're showing these guys, and they say scientists have extracted and analyzed DNA from mummies that are thousands of years old, and they have found that the ancient Egyptians are actually more genetically similar to people living in Near East centuries like Israel, Lebanon, and Syria than even the Egyptians that are in Egypt today. For a long time, so this is the new dynasty, like something in 1300 or so and forward, and they seem to have a lot more in common with people of the Levant area than they do of them. For a long time, we thought that mummies preserved no DNA. In 2010, a team analyzed ancient DNA from 16 royal mummies, but the method they used wasn't good at distinguishing actual mummy DNA from modern DNA. That might have been contamination used over the years. So they end up doing a genome study onto them and using their teeth, and out of that, they end up finding they can get some. And out of 151 mummies out of a site 100 kilometers south of Cairo, these mummies were excavated in early 20th century at a radiocarbon dating showing their lifespan between 1,300 years, or from about 1388 BC all the way up to 426. So this is the New Kingdom time. And there was no usable genetic material in any of the remaining soft tissue, but some left in bones and teeth. 90 of these mummies had incomplete DNA, and only 3 retained complete intact genome DNA. So they went through a lot of them trying to get all this sequence. And they knew that they had any that seemed tainted at all, they just tossed them. The 3 mummies are the ones the scientists focused on. So now they've done like 24 of them, I think. But and I did another video where they had done 6 more, so they were at 10 at that time, and now they have 14 more. So here's a map of where they're talking about. And so, here's Cairo and Giza Plateau. and then you go on up the Nile to here, and this is right over near El Fayoum, but across the other side is where they found them at. And it's a burial ground that they have that's through the area that actually has thousands of them. By the way, here's Ba Araya Oasis, and Ba is more like a hill or a mesa, and area, Ba area, so Aryan Oasis, and they found white skeletons all around it. The team then compared ancient mummy DNA to DNA of both ancient and modern people in the same region. It turns out that on a genetic level, the ancient Egyptians aren't so different from modern people living in the Near East, but not in Egypt. In fact, they have more common with those of the Near East than today's Egyptians. For example, the mummies didn't have any DNA from sub-Saharan Africa. None. Whereas about 20% of today's Egyptians have some sub-Saharan genes. Study-led author Awanis Cross, the modern-day variation might be because either the spread of Islam or more the trade increased contact between the two different parts and into Africa. And that makes sense. The DNA sequencing method used study makes the results robust. The researchers looked at any DNA in a given sample and then isolated the genetic material that might be human. The team then looked for patterns of DNA and allowing them to ignore the DNA that might be from contamination. And in doing so, these findings are interesting, but even more promising is the fact that the method could pave the way for even more genetic studies of mummies so we can understand more details about these ancient people. And I think it's neat, just finding out the truth about all this stuff. But so, ancient Egyptian mummies. There's a video here that Mike's got, and it shows a lot of the ancient Egyptian mummies. And I won't go through the whole thing, but in it, it shows that they have new technology and stuff that shows the new pharaohs, or not the new pharaohs, but the ancient pharaohs and even the old dynasty and these first dynasties that's ever came out that they found whenever they DNA these. And this is part of the 24. That what they end up finding is that they have a lot of Caucasian and no DNA from any of the sub-Saharan African in them at all. And it seems like what has happened is they first were down in Egypt, and that somewhere in the Middle Dynasties they moved up into Northern European and across. And some also split off and went to the Ural Mountains and up through there. And so that's how we get the different changes or splits from it. So let's take a look at this real quick, and we'll just cut in. Do I not have it up? We'll go back a little bit and let him tell it.
European occupants of Egypt were believed to have begun abandoning the increasingly warm country and headed to the cooler climates of Europe. Then after about 1500 BC, the population in the area became increasingly mixed, with the Nubians from the south of Egypt, which explains the typical physical appearance and genetic makeup of modern-day Egyptians. This theory strongly refutes the ideas of Afrocentrism, with the presentation of several archaeological, anthropological, and forensic evidences, three of which I am about to discuss with you now. One of the most famous cases of mummies of ancient Egypt that had red or blonde hair is one of the Ghibeline pre-dynastic mummies, which is housed in the British Museum, commonly referred to by curators in the public as Ginger. This ancestor.
Now this is Ginger, but she's pre-dynastic. This is before the dynasties even really got going, and they found her, and they have blonde and red hair.
More than 5,000 years ago in the late
she has red.
Period,
he has blonde curly hair.
BC or earlier. His mummified body was found in a cemetery at Ghibeline, Egypt, with his toes and fingernails perfectly preserved.
Blonde,
he was
curly
given
hair.
the nickname of Ginger because of his golden curly hair, which interestingly looks similar to the curly locks often seen on Greek and Roman sculptures. And although his body is stained from buried in the sand for more than 5,000 years, this Egyptian ancestor looked like he once had yellowish white skin. Another example of uncovered red-haired mummies from ancient Egypt are the ones found among thousands of other mummies by a group of archaeologists in the Fagol Gamis graveyard in the south of Cairo. Archaeology.
Now they've dug up almost 1 million graves here over the years, and they haven't really gone into DNA on them very much at all. If they find one that's really good, they're supposed to start passing them now.
Geologists from Brigham Young University in Utah have been excavating that cemetery for about 30 years, and they have established that many of the mummies they have found dates back to 30 BC, which is around the time when the Roman or Byzantine Empire ruled Egypt. Researchers reached the conclusion that there were more than 1 million bodies within the cemetery, and it was revealed that the cemetery was not intended for royalty, but for the common people. There were many interesting discoveries that were uncovered in the excavation of this ancient cemetery in the analysis of the mummies found buried in the area. And one of them is the observation that the mummies appear to be clustered together according to their hair color. They found blonde-haired mummies in one area, while another area was filled with red-haired ones. This led to the overall impression that the clusters of mummies buried by hair color in the graveyard could be indicative that these people once belonged in the same family groups and therefore were related with each other. This also speaks...
This is right outside the Temple of Anubis, too, in a burial ground there that they call the necropolis. I'm sure you might have heard that before, but the necropolis is the land of the dead. And this is where everybody used to get buried at. And whenever you hear about people going to the underworld, it's because they understood where the equator was. The ancient Sumerians did. And then whenever people died, they didn't get buried in Sumer. They got buried down in Egypt, in the land of the dead.
Volumes of the possibility that a small but significant part of ancient Egypt's population were red-haired or blonde-haired individuals. The last case...
So that was weird. You see all those two yellow-haired
Egyptian mummies we will be discussing is the preserved body of Ramses II, who is
Ramses.
arguably the most famous of all the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Ramses II ruled as a pharaoh of the 19th dynasty between 1279 to 1213 BC. It is believed to be the one who reigned when the children of Israel were liberated through the prophet Moses. In 1975, the Egyptian government tasked French scientists to attempt the preservation of Ramses' mummy. This opened an opportunity for researchers to determine his age, body condition,
He's got a Greek
diet,
nose
his
and
racial affinities. There were those
Roman.
who were of the opinion that Ramses II was black. However, according to the study conducted by Professor P.F. Scaldi and his research team, microscopic examinations of the pharaoh's hair roots showed that his hair had natural red pigments, which meant that in his younger years, Ramses II was a redhead. Moreover, it was also determined that Ramses had way...
Look at that. And it's really like a blondish red. It's really like a blonde hair. And even though he's old, he apparently still has quite a bit of color to his hair.
Hair. And a combination of these features meant that the pharaoh was fair-skinned. While there have been enough evidence for some experts to conclude that some ancient Egyptians were blonde or red-haired, there are still many researchers who believe that there were no ancient Egyptians whose natural hair weren't dark brown or black. Some of these skeptics argue that mummies found with light-colored strands of hair can be explained by the effects of the mummification process itself. And so, to find a definitive answer to this intriguing question about the effects of the mummification process on human hair, Dr. Jeanette Davey from the Victoria Institute of Forensic Medicine in Australia decided to conduct experiments on 16 hair samples from men and women aged between 4 and 92 years old. Most of the hair samples were dark colored, but for comparison, one of the sample strands was gray, while another one was fair. There was also one strand with henna on it. Davey and her colleague, retired industrial chemist Alan Elliott, also prepared some powder of synthetic natron for their experiment. Natron was a type of soap that was applied on the bodies during the process of mummification to dry them out. It has also been linked to the supposed change in hair color of the human remains. Davey and Elliott covered the hair samples in synthetic natron for 40 days, the same amount of time believed to be required back in ancient times to dry out the human body. When the 40-day period had passed, the samples were removed from the salty powder, and after undergoing microscopic analysis, it was determined that there was no change in the color of the hair samples at all. For Dr. Davey, the result of her experiment is convincing enough to say that fair-haired Egyptians did exist in ancient Egypt. It's just that...
So that's interesting. So they got to find a lot of them. Well, that's what he's fixing to say right now. They got to find some of them. Here's one.
Finding fair-haired Egyptian mummies has so far been a very rare occurrence. Some ancient Egyptians could have been blue-eyed blondes or redheads, and while the country during those times was not as multicultural as several parts of the world are today, there were certainly a variety of racial mixes that made the existence of fair-skinned Egyptians possible. Now, is this discovery particularly earth-shattering? Well, it depends.
It depends on which angle you look at it from, but I guess no matter what, the truth is the truth, you know. And I think that's incredible. Well, hell, you look at this, and this is Isis, and Isis is definitely looks Caucasian here. So, yeah. Y'all subscribe, like if you liked it. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. But we're just trying to have the truth of everything here. Appreciate y'all. Enjoy.